What happens when Hollywood's most charismatic leading man, beloved for his authenticity and charm, steps onto the vibrant red sofa of the world's most unpredictable talk show host? Pedro Pascal thought he was joining the Graham Norton show for a fun, promotional chat to hype his latest blockbuster, The Fantastic Four: First Steps, a retro-futuristic Marvel adventure that had fans buzzing and critics raving for its fresh take on Marvel's first family. But what unfolded was a fiery, no-holds-barred confrontation that left the star-studded audience gasping, producers scrambling, and social media exploding with reactions that would dominate global headlines. This wasn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. It was a raw, unfiltered clash that stripped away the polished veneer of late-night television, exposing personal tensions and shattering professional decorum in front of a live audience. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because this story doesn't just escalate, it ignites, with every moment more shocking than the last, and you won't believe how it ends. Pedro Pascal strode onto the set of the Graham Norton show, his signature charisma dialed to 11, flashing that warm, disarming smile that had won over millions in The Mandalorian, The Last of Us, and now The Fantastic Four: First Steps, where he played the brilliant Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic. The London studio erupted in cheers, the audience a mix of devoted fans waving signs and A-listers like Anya Taylor-Joy and Tom Hiddleston, all perched on the iconic red sofa, ready for Graham's trademark blend of wit and charm. The set was a kaleidoscope of color, bright lights, a sleek bar, and a massive screen flashing clips from Pedro's new film, its 1960s-inspired aesthetic earning gasps of delight. But beneath the lively atmosphere, there was a subtle undercurrent, a glint in Graham Norton's eyes that hinted at mischief, a spark that suggested this wouldn't be the jovial, banter-filled chat Pedro's team had prepped him for. He'd navigated countless interviews, from intense press junkets to playful exchanges with hosts like Jimmy Fallon. But something about Graham's overly animated grin, his posture a touch too eager, put Pedro on guard, like an actor sensing a scene about to veer off script. Graham kicked things off with his usual flamboyant energy, welcoming the audience with a cheeky quip about London's dreary weather, introducing Pedro with a flourish, hyping The Fantastic Four: First Steps as the Marvel movie everyone's talking about, and tossing in a playful jab about Pedro's internet daddy status that drew laughs from the crowd. Anya and Tom chuckled, but Graham's tone shifted slightly as he settled into his chair, his smile sharpening as he leaned forward, his voice taking on a mischievous edge. He mentioned looking forward to this chat for ages, his words carrying a weight that made the audience lean in, sensing something brewing beneath his polished charm. Pedro settled onto the sofa, exuding his laid-back confidence, his dark eyes twinkling as he thanked Graham for having him, joking about the thrill of filming in London and how the city's pubs had become his second home during the Fantastic Four shoot. The crowd roared, but Graham wasn't here for small talk, diving into the deep end by referencing a recent interview where Pedro had commented on talk show hosts who leaned too hard into controversy for laughs, suggesting some should focus on entertaining rather than stirring the pot with divisive hot takes. The audience stirred, the mood shifting from festive to uneasy, as Graham pressed him, pulling out a quote with theatrical flair, his voice dripping with playful challenge, asking if Pedro really believed hosts like him were more about shock value than substance, his words landing like a velvet-gloved punch in the lively studio. Pedro's smile tightened, but he kept his composure, his hands clasped as he clarified that his comments were about authenticity, not aimed at anyone specific, emphasizing that he valued genuine conversations over manufactured drama designed to go viral. He spoke with a measured tone, his Chilean accent softening his words, explaining that his perspective came from a place of respect for audiences who deserved entertainment that connected rather than provoked for clicks. Graham, however, wasn't letting it slide, his grin widening as he leaned back, his voice laced with mock surprise, questioning whether Pedro With his Hollywood success and roles as larger-than-life heroes like Reed Richards, was really in a position to judge hosts who keep things lively for their viewers. The audience laughed nervously, sensing the tension, as Anya and Tom exchanged uneasy glances, clearly unprepared for the shift from banter to confrontation. Pedro pushed back, his voice steady but carrying a hint of frustration, explaining that his upbringing in San Antonio, raised by immigrant parents who worked tirelessly to provide for their family, gave him a grounded perspective, unlike some hosts who, in his view, turned serious issues into punchlines to score laughs at the expense of understanding. He mentioned his mother's sacrifices, her long hours as a psychologist to keep food on the table, and how those experiences shaped his belief that entertainers should respect their audience's struggles, not exploit them for entertainment. Graham's eyes gleamed with mischief, his smile now more provocative than playful, as he accused Pedro of hypocrisy, suggesting his humble roots were just a convenient narrative to sell his films, a story he leaned into while living a life of red carpet glamour and multi-million-dollar paychecks. The audience gasped softly, sensing the line he was crossing, as Pedro's jaw clenched, his charm giving way to a steely resolve. He countered, his voice firm but controlled, pointing out that Graham's own success, his lavish lifestyle and global fame, hardly made him the everyman he played up with his cheeky anecdotes, a jab that drew a few murmurs of agreement from the crowd. Pedro spoke passionately about his journey, from struggling in New York's theater scene to breaking out in Hollywood, emphasizing that his authenticity wasn't a brand but a lived experience, unlike some hosts who thrived on stirring controversy to keep their shows trending. The studio grew quiet, the tension palpable, as Anya tried to lighten the mood with a nervous quip about Fantastic Four's cool retro aesthetic. But Graham waved it off, his voice sharp as he doubled down, accusing Pedro of dodging accountability for his holier-than-thou comments and questioning his right to critique a host who'd built a career on connecting with audiences. Pedro's frustration bubbled up, his hands gripping the sofa as he fired back, saying Graham had invited him to promote the Fantastic Four, First Steps, only to ambush him with personal attacks, a move he called unfair and disrespectful to both him and the viewers tuning in for a fun night. The stage was set for a showdown that would only get more explosive, as the audience braced for what would come next in this electrifying clash of titans. The studio of the Graham Norton show was a cauldron of tension, the vibrant energy of the London audience now replaced by a hushed anticipation as Pedro Pascal and Graham Norton locked horns in a confrontation that had transformed a lighthearted, promotional segment into a live television spectacle. The iconic red sofa, occupied by Pedro alongside Anya Taylor-Joy and Tom Hiddleston, seemed to shrink under the weight of the escalating drama, the bright lights amplifying every gesture, every glance, as the cameras captured a moment that was rapidly becoming legendary. Pedro stood tall, his earlier charm now tempered by a steely resolve, his dark eyes burning with frustration as he faced Graham, whose mischievous grin had morphed into something sharper, more confrontational, his Irish lilt carrying a biting edge that cut through the studio's silence. The audience, a mix of starstruck fans and A-listers, sat riveted, their earlier laughter replaced by gasps and murmurs, while producers in the control room scrambled, their headsets buzzing with frantic instructions as they grappled with the situation, spiraling out of control on live TV. This wasn't just a disagreement anymore. It was a full-blown war of words, egos, and principles, one that threatened to redefine both Pedro and Graham's public images. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts in the comments, because this showdown is about to explode, and the next few minutes will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about these two icons. Graham Norton leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with a mix of defiance and showman's bravado, his voice dripping with mock indignation as he accused Pedro of playing the victim, claiming he couldn't handle being called out for his high and mighty comments about talk show hosts chasing controversy for laughs. He waved a hand theatrically, his grin sharp as he suggested Pedro's charm, That internet daddy persona that had fans swooning was just a Hollywood mask to hide his privilege, a calculated act to sell films like The Fantastic Four, First Steps, where he played the brainy Reed Richards. The audience shifted uncomfortably, some chuckling nervously at Graham's cheeky delivery, others sensing the line he was crossing, as Anya and Tom exchanged uneasy glances, clearly wishing for a return to the show's usual banter. Pedro's jaw tightened, his hands clenching the edge of the sofa, but he kept his composure, his voice steady, his Chilean accent growing more pronounced as he countered, accusing Graham of twisting his words to paint him as the villain, a tactic he said was all too common in today's click-driven media. He explained that he'd come to promote his film, a story of teamwork and resilience that echoed his own values, only to be ambushed with accusations designed to humiliate him in front of a global audience, a move he called not just unfair but deliberately provocative. Graham's smile widened, his tone playful but cutting, as he leaned back, challenging Pedro's authenticity, questioning how someone who'd starred in blockbusters like The Fantastic Four, First Steps could claim to understand the struggles of everyday people, the kind who tuned into his show for a bit of escapism. He brought up Pedro's recent red carpet appearances, his tailored suits, his friendships with Hollywood elites, painting a picture of a man who'd left his San Antonio roots far behind for the glitz of fame, his words laced with a sarcasm that drew scattered laughs but also gasps from the crowd. Pedro's eyes narrowed, his frustration bubbling up, but he kept his voice controlled, pointing out that Graham's own success, his swanky London lifestyle, his BAFTA awards, hardly made him the everyman he played up with his cheeky anecdotes about Irish pubs and quirky fan encounters. He spoke passionately about his upbringing, his parents' struggles as Chilean immigrants, his mother's long hours as a psychologist, his father's relentless hustle to provide stability, stories he rarely shared publicly but felt compelled to defend now, his voice resonating with a sincerity that quieted the room. He accused Graham of using his platform to stir drama for ratings, turning serious issues into punchlines. A pattern, he said, was evident in the show's tendency to poke fun at cultural divides or political differences, rather than foster understanding. The studio was a pressure cooker now, the tension so thick it seemed to hum through the air as Graham fired back, his voice rising with a mix of amusement and defiance, claiming his show was a celebration of joy, a space where he brought people together through laughter and stories, not division. He accused Pedro of being ungrateful for the platform, suggesting he was biting the hand that fed him by daring to critique a host who'd welcomed him with open arms, his words dripping with mock hurt that played to the audience's sympathies. Pedro shook his head, his frustration boiling over, his voice cutting through Graham's theatrics as he pointed out that gratitude didn't mean sitting quietly while being ambushed, that he'd come prepared to talk about the Fantastic Four, not to be dragged into a personal vendetta designed to go viral. He challenged Graham to name a single episode where he'd had a genuine, respectful dialogue with someone who disagreed with him, a question that hung unanswered, drawing murmurs from the crowd as Graham shuffled his cue cards, his grin faltering for a split second before he recovered with a quip, joking that Pedro's serious actor vibe was giving him Oscars flashbacks, a line that drew laughs but didn't diffuse the tension. The confrontation took a darker turn when Graham, in a moment of reckless showmanship, brought up Pedro's early days in Hollywood, referencing his struggles with bit parts in New York and Los Angeles, scraping by before his big break in Narcos. He suggested, with a smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes, that Pedro had sold out his roots for fame, trading authenticity for the Marvel paycheck and the glamour of playing Reed Richards, a low blow that drew audible gasps from the audience and a tense silence from Anya and Tom, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. Pedro's face hardened, his eyes darkening with a mix of anger and disbelief, as he leaned forward, his voice low and cutting, accusing Graham of weaponizing his past to undermine his credibility, a tactic he said was beneath someone of his stature and influence. He spoke with raw honesty about those early years, describing late nights studying scripts in cramped apartments, rejections that stung, and the constant pressure to prove himself in an industry that often dismissed outsiders. Stories that resonated with many in the audience who nodded in quiet support. He turned the tables, questioning Graham's own journey, pointing out that his rise from Irish comedy clubs to global fame came with its own compromises, asking if he'd ever forgotten the small-town roots he played up when he was hosting lavish London galas or hobnobbing with royalty. The audience was riveted, their silence broken only by occasional gasps. As the clash reached new heights, each exchange more personal, more cutting than the last. Graham, his composure tested, stood up from his chair, his voice sharp as he accused Pedro of disrespecting his show, his audience, and his legacy as a host who'd brought joy to millions, claiming Pedro was trying to paint himself as a victim while attacking his authenticity. Pedro stood his ground, his posture unwavering, his voice steady but laced with a quiet fury as he countered that respect was earned, not demanded, and that Graham had lost his the moment he chose to ambush him instead of engaging in good faith, a statement that drew scattered applause from the crowd. He spoke directly to the audience, his eyes sweeping the studio, urging them to see through the theatrics, to recognize who was trying to have an honest conversation and who was chasing viral moments for clout. His words striking a chord with many who clapped softly, their support emboldening him further. Graham's eyes flashed with irritation, his hands gesturing wildly as he shot back, claiming he was standing up for his viewers, giving them the truth about celebrities who thought they were above scrutiny. But Pedro cut him off, his voice rising with a controlled intensity that silenced the room, accusing him of turning discourse into a circus, where disagreement was weaponized for laughs rather than understanding. The breaking point loomed as Graham, in a moment of reckless bravado, told Pedro to stick to stretching in spandex as Reed Richards, and leave the real talk to hosts who knew how to connect with audiences, his words dripping with condescension that drew a collective gasp from the crowd. Pedro's face hardened, his eyes narrowing to slits, and he took a step closer, prompting security to inch forward, their hands poised but hesitant as he remained calm, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. He dismantled Graham's argument with precision, pointing out that his global fame, his luxury lifestyle, his chummy chats with A-listers, hardly made him the voice of the everyday viewer he claimed to represent, a truth that landed like a punch, drawing murmurs of agreement. He accused Graham of hiding behind his cheeky charm to mask a mean streak, a pattern evident in his tendency to mock guests who didn't fit his narrative, a jab that stung as the audience shifted uncomfortably. Graham's composure cracked, his voice rising as he demanded Pedro leave his set, claiming he didn't need to tolerate arrogant actors disrespecting his show, his words echoing through the silent studio as producers braced for what would happen next, the outcome still hanging in the balance. The studio of the Graham Norton show was a crucible of silence, the vibrant energy of the London audience now a distant memory as Pedro Pascal stood at the edge of the iconic red sofa, his dark eyes blazing with a mix of defiance and disappointment, his decision to walk away hanging like a thunderbolt over the stunned crowd. Graham Norton, his earlier mischief replaced by a flushed, unsteady expression, stood rigid behind his desk, his cheeky grin gone, his Irish lilt trembling with a mix of anger and regret as he realized he'd pushed too far in front of a global audience. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every second of the fallout, as producers in the control room scrambled, their headsets a cacophony of panicked whispers, desperate to salvage a segment that had become a live TV catastrophe. Anya Taylor-Joy and Tom Hiddleston, seated awkwardly on the sofa, exchanged nervous glances, their attempts at lightening the mood long abandoned, while security guards hovered near the set, their presence a silent reminder of the line this clash had nearly crossed. The audience sat frozen, their earlier cheers replaced by a tense hush, as they waited for the final act of a drama that had already etched itself into television history. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts below. Because this is the moment where the truth of who won this battle comes into sharp focus, and the consequences will leave you stunned. Pedro took a slow, deliberate step toward the exit, his voice cutting through the silence with a quiet power that commanded the room. Addressing the audience one last time, his words measured but heavy with conviction, urging them to remember this moment, to see who had tried to foster an honest conversation about the Fantastic Four and the power of storytelling, and who had chosen to chase viral drama for laughs. He spoke of his hope for better discourse, for entertainers to use their platforms to unite rather than divide, his Chilean accent lending a sincerity that resonated deeply, drawing scattered applause from the crowd, a sign that his authenticity had struck a chord. Graham's face reddened, his hands trembling as he tried to regain control, his voice sharp as he shouted after Pedro, accusing him of running away, of dodging accountability, of disrespecting his show and its viewers. But his words sounded hollow, lacking the playful bite they'd had earlier, betraying a desperation to reclaim the narrative. Pedro paused at the edge of the set, turning back one final time, his eyes locking onto Graham's, his voice low and cutting, saying that Graham had proven his point, that his need to provoke, to humiliate, to win at all costs, was exactly what was wrong with today's media. A truth that hung in the air like a final verdict, drawing murmurs of agreement from the audience. Graham stood frozen, his chest heaving, his eyes darting around the studio as if searching for support. But the silence from the crowd and the tense expressions of his crew told him he'd lost more than just the argument. The cameras captured the moment his composure crumbled, his usual charm replaced by a mix of fury and humiliation, as he realized he'd handed Pedro a victory that would echo far beyond the London studio. The producers cut to commercial, their voices frantic as they tried to pivot, but the damage was done, the confrontation seared into the minds of millions watching live. As Pedro disappeared through the exit, his head held high, the studio remained in a stunned hush. Graham sinking back into his chair, his hands covering his face for a fleeting moment, before he forced a strained smile, trying to salvage the show, but everyone knew there was no coming back from this. Social media ignited within minutes, clips of the clash spreading like wildfire across platforms, hashtags like #PedroVSGraham and #Norton Meltdown trending as fans and critics dissected every word, every gesture, every moment of the explosive exchange, with headlines screaming, "Pedro Pascal walks off Graham Norton. Show in shocking clash, and Graham Norton's ambush backfires in epic showdown." The aftermath was swift and unrelenting, as news outlets analyzed the confrontation, praising Pedro's grace under pressure, his ability to defend his principles without stooping to Graham's level, while criticizing Graham for turning a promotional interview into a personal vendetta, alienating even his loyal fans. Commentators noted how Pedro's raw honesty, his willingness to share his struggles as an immigrant son and call out divisive tactics, had resonated with viewers, while Graham's reliance on cheeky jabs and condescension had exposed a mean streak that clashed with his jovial persona. The internet buzzed with reaction videos, memes, and think pieces, with one viral tweet declaring, "Pedro Pascal just schooled Graham Norton on authenticity," a sentiment echoed globally. Graham's team issued a vague statement about lively debates and passionate exchanges, but it did little to quell the backlash as viewers questioned his credibility, his charm tainted by a moment of hubris. Pedro remained silent, letting his exit speak for itself, a move that amplified his victory as fans rallied around him, praising his integrity and his refusal to be baited into a circus. His role as Reed Richards in the Fantastic Four only gaining more buzz as a result. The confrontation was over, but its impact would ripple for years, a defining moment that exposed the cost of turning discourse into a spectacle, a lesson in the power of authenticity over manufactured drama. Pedro had come to promote a film but left as the victor in a battle of principles, his reputation elevated as a voice of reason and respect. Graham, meanwhile, lost something irreplaceable that night: the trust of his audience, his cheeky persona forever shadowed by a moment of overreach. Every time this clash is revisited, in viral clips or heated debates, people will remember who stood for genuine conversation and who chose to play the provocateur, who walked away with grace and who was left in the wreckage of their own making. A legacy that will outlast the laughter and define their places in the public eye forever.
Thank you for watching our channel Modern Stories. If you liked our video, you should subscribe for more amazing videos like this. Have a healthy and happy day. See you in the next one.